Welcome to Lesson 7 in Microsoft Excel 2010 with Megan Reese. In this assignment, we're going to learn more about graphing. This time, we are going to pull data from the internet and turn it into a graph that is readable, makes sense, and makes a statement. That can be one of the hardest parts about making a graph. It's easy to highlight it and press Insert Graph. What's harder is taking raw data and turning it into a graph that makes sense. So to get started, we're going to be graphing baby names today. We're going to be graphing your first name. Now, a couple of things to note. If you have a first name that is very, very common, like Michael, a name that's been in the top 10 for 100 years, you may want to consider doing a different name. Once you've looked up your results, if your results are going to be very flat and it's just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 or something, you may want to choose a different name just so that your graph's a little more interesting to graph. On the other side, if you have a very unusual name and it's not on the list or it doesn't show up on the list very often, you may also want to pick another name that will make a more useful graph. The third note is that if you have a name that's relatively common but you have an unusual spelling, you may want to do a search for the more common spelling because the name itself is what we're graphing, not just the spelling of it. So to get started, you need to go to the Social Security website. This is the site you're going to go to, www.ssa.gov/OACT/baby names. This is an official source of the most common names in the United States from the Social Security website. In this, they list the top 1,000 names for male and female, and it goes back about 100 years. So to go to the site, you're going to scroll down a little bit. It'll tell you what the names are right now, but we want to go down here and do popularity of a name. And then you're going to type the name that you're choosing into the name box. So I'm just going to do Matilda just because that's what popped in my head for some reason. And then number of years, type 100 no matter what your years are. And this is a female name, so I'm going to click go. And it takes a minute for it to populate an answer. Okay, so mine has come up. And as you can see, the name that I chose has a rank of 658 in 2012. You'll also see there are a lot of A's here. What that means is that the name did not appear in those years, but it does appear in the past. Okay, so if it's a name that didn't ever appear until 2008, you won't see any of this. But because it has previous entries, it just has A, not applicable. It's just not in those years. And it skips a few years, and then you can see the popularity. So let's say I do another name like Tiffany. It's important that before you continue, you assess your data and decide if it's good data and how you can make it make sense on the page. When I do the name Tiffany, it's actually going down in popularity as well since the 90s, but you'll notice it only goes back to 1962. I don't get any data before 1962 because it didn't appear on the list until that point. So you have to keep that in mind as well. I still want you to go back 100 years on your graph. So if your name doesn't start until a later date, just put a 0 there for those years since they don't have any data for those years. So take a few minutes, go ahead and do a search for your name or the name you'd like to choose. Assess the data, decide if it's good, if it's a good name that you'd like to graph, or if maybe it would be better to do different data, different name. And also start looking at which years you think would be the best to put on your graph. So take a minute to look that over. Please pause the video now and complete the instructions just given. Now, because this is a graph that's going to show change over time, how a name's popularity goes up and down over the years, we're going to do a line chart. So I want you to go ahead and open up a blank page in Excel. There's no starter for this assignment. And figure out how you're going to put this information on your page. I'm actually going to give you a minute to mess with that a little bit. I want you to pause the video and figure it out, and then come back and see if you were able to get it right. I don't want you to just watch the video and just do what I do. I want you to try to figure it out for yourself because that's how you're really going to learn. But a couple of little points I want to mention before I pause this. Don't just copy and paste. Okay, a lot of kids do that. They just copy and paste the whole thing and try to graph the whole thing. You have a lot of data. You do not need to include every year. So you're going to want to look at this information and decide what years you want to do. Every 5 years, every 10 years. Please make sure you cover a 100-year range. You'll understand why later in the assignment. So even if your name doesn't start till the 60s or the 30s or whatever, do 100 years. So maybe do 1910, 1920, 1940, or whatever. You may want to include your birth year. So if you were born in 2006, then you do 2006, and then 5 years before that. Make sure you also label your rank column with the name that you are going to do. So I want you to go ahead and mess with that. Pull in some of this data. Pick and choose what you're going to need. Please do not copy and paste it, or if you do, copy and paste it, but then just take from it what you need. Don't just say, okay, I'll graph all these years. That's way too many data points. So you decide what you're going to do and which years you're going to do. So right now we're going to pause the video. I want you to type in all your information, your rank and your name and the years. And once you've done all the typing, come back and we'll see if you did it right. Please pause the video now and complete the instructions just given. Okay, hopefully yours looks something like this. You have the years in column A, you have the ranks in column B, and the name Lester above column B. If you haven't typed it that way, it probably won't work. Now, if you did it the other way around, where you started with 1950 and went the other direction, that's actually better if you did it that way, and you'll see why in a minute. Either way works, but if you did it backwards, then that's actually really good for you. You'll notice that there's no data for the name Lester in the last 10 years. So I put zeros there for those years. And so if you have any blank years, for now, just type a 0 in there. Now we're going to go ahead and graph that with a line chart. Highlight it, insert, line, and just do the 2D for now. And there's my chart. Now, your chart may look quite different than this one, but they're all going to have the same problem. This actually has 3 major problems. Number 1, it's backwards in the years. So it starts in 2010 and goes to 1915. Now that's a problem because it makes it, you think of years linear. So we really should have it go the other way. That's why it's better if you started with 1915 and worked your way down. If you did that, then yours isn't backwards. But if you didn't, like me, we're going to be able to fix that, so don't really worry about that. So that's the first problem. The second problem is not only is the graph backwards, so it should be flipped the other way, it's also upside down. It looks like in 2010 it went way up in popularity and then it's been dropping, okay? It's actually backwards. It was really popular in 1950 and it's been losing popularity. And then why does it go up really high like that? That's our third problem. And that is that if you have a year where there's nothing there, you really don't want to put a 0 because 0 doesn't mean anything in rank. Okay, if 0 is before 1 and 1 is our highest number, okay? Which brings us to another problem, which is that 0 is the first number, okay? There is no rank 0. We need that to be a 1. So there are a lot of problems with this graph, and that's one of the reasons why I like this assignment is to show you that just when you highlight it and graph it, you're not done. You need to look at your information and assess your data. Is this good? Does this make sense? How can I make it more clear? So to do that, we're going to go ahead and first of all, we're going to flip these. So I'm going to click on my axis, my x-axis. I'm going to right click and choose Format Axis, and I'm going to check this box that says categories in reverse order. Now that's nice and all. It put 1915 over here and 2010 over here, but it also put my y-axis on the right side, which I find quite awkward. We're not used to looking at graphs that look like that. So all you have to do is check this box at maximum category. It'll flip it back over. Okay. So now my graph is at least in order from 1915 to 2010, which is nice. Still, we have a problem though. We need to fix our rank over here. We need it to be 1 at the top and 1,000 at the bottom. So we're going to click on our y-axis. We're going to right click, Format Axis. And first, we did this before in lesson 6. We're going to go in and change our fixed values. So I'm going to go to fixed and change minimum to 1 and maximum to 1,000. Now, the issue with that is that if you look over here, you're going to get 101, 201, 301. I don't really know a way around that. I don't think it really bothers anyone. Just leave it like that. That's fine because we're starting with 1 instead of 0, but it's all good. And then we're going to reverse the values. And then once again, we have the same problem where our years are all along the top, which is also very awkward. Click the maximum axis value and it switches it back. So now we've got a nice graph showing that it was ranked very high in 1915 and then steadily has been losing popularity as time goes by. And then it looks like in 2000 it jumped up, when really in 2000 it completely dropped off the charts altogether. So we're going to, instead of doing a 0, we're going to do 1001. So if you have any years that are not on the list, just do 1001 so it drops off the list entirely. And there we have our first part of this chart. Now we're not done. We want to add 3 more names to this list. So I want you to pause the video and figure out how you're going to add those names, how you're going to type them in to make it make sense. Don't worry about the graph right now. Just worry about how to type that in so that it works, and pick 3 more names, preferably ones that mean something to you, maybe your siblings or your aunts or uncles or grandparents or something like that. Please pause the video now and complete the instructions just given. If you typed it in like this, then you did it right. Sometimes I get students that try to type their years all over again. So they'll come in here and they'll say, oh, well, you know, this name's better if I do 2012, and, you know, and they'll go down that way. You can't do new years, okay? That's why I told you to go back 100 years, even if your name doesn't go back that far, so that you can accommodate other names we're going to add. So you have to continue with the exact same years you used before. Hopefully you were pretty versatile that it will work out. So I went ahead and entered the name Xavier. And now what I'm going to do is highlight my graph, and you'll see that these colored lines come up. All I have to do is put my cursor on this little line right here, drag it across, and it will automatically include the name Xavier. You'll notice I lost my title, which is good. We didn't want our title to be Lester anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and add a chart title, and I'm going to call this name popularity. I want you to pick the one that has the axis, which is just chart number 1, because this axis title, it's kind of important that people know what these numbers mean. So that's why you're going to type rank here. And then, sorry, I changed it so many times. Name popularity is the title. Now, in order to have this assignment finished, you need to have 2 more names. So make sure you fill those out. Okay, I went ahead and added 2 more names. I know I've picked really unusual names, but that's because their charts are more interesting for me to look at. So I kind of prefer that. But I'm going to go ahead and drag these over. And now I have 4 names listed. The last thing is to go into your chart tools, maybe reorder it, do different colors, you know, mess with it however you want using the methods that you have learned. And once you're there, that's it. That's the end of the assignment. Make sure you add a header and you can save it and turn it in. Thanks for joining us.